Hey Young Turks, I'm Nomiki Konst, live from Los Angeles right now, where we're going to give you a little bit of an update on the drama that's been happening in New York State. Of course, you guys have been following the fact that the New York State legislature, which should be completely controlled by Democrats, is not. There's a Democratic governor. The legislature itself is Democratic, the assembly, but the Senate, which is elected as Democratic, couldn't be controlled, is not controlled by Democrats because of this thing called the Independent Democratic Conference, which is the IDC. You guys have been following it. There's 8 members and another member who are not conferencing with the Democrats, giving control of the Senate to Republicans, holding up massive sweeping progressive legislation in New York State, which of course is one of the most powerful states in the country. We are so honored to have the leader of the Democratic Conference, who is the first female leader in Albany. She would be the leader of the Senate if she did have control as elected as a Democrat, Senator Andrea Stewart Cousins, who is from the 35th district, I believe.
That's absolutely right.
And that makes up much of upstate Westchester area. So thank you so much, Senator, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you.
Nice to see you again. So last time we spoke a few months ago, we were talking about the debacle in the Senate, the IDC, and of course you went through budget negotiations, and the Senate is on break right now, is on recess, and there's still been some drama going on. You've had several meetings. A couple of weeks ago, there was a report that you met with the governor and to sort of sort out this drama that's happening and come up with a deal. Is a deal going to happen?
Well, I think we certainly want it to happen. I think that obviously, as you've so rightfully explained the situation, we are a chamber that continues to elect a majority of Democrats. But because of this deal that the independent Democrats have with Republicans, we are not the governing majority. So, I mean, it's been going on now for 7 years. This is not new. It's unfortunately sort of ingrained. But with the advent, I use that word loosely, but with the new president, people started looking around at the various chambers across the country and realized that the Republicans have control of about 33 chambers completely, and the Democrats have about 6. And of course, right here in New York, where you'd think, because of the demographics, we would also have a democratically controlled legislature. We do not. Why? Because the Republicans have paid a lot of attention to state legislatures, and apparently the Democrats less so. The Republicans seem to have figured out what we have all come to know, that the state houses are places where legislation happens that could be progressive, could be leading edge legislation for the nation. It's also that kind of bench team. This is where Congress gets its membership and ultimately even presidents. So, I mean, state legislatures matter. They draw lines in terms of redistricting, and the Republicans have paid an utmost attention to it. And in New York, where actually the Republicans are not able to keep the numerical majority, they've done the next best thing. They found Democrats who are willing to partner with them to allow Republicans to keep the majority. I would like that over. Most of my Democratic colleagues want that to be done with. And the conversation that you talked about was the governor bringing my conference actually together to talk about a path forward, because I think we all collectively understand how we could just be subjected to so many regressive policies in New York if Democrats are not in control.
And, part of the reason some say that this meeting did convene is because there's been so much public pressure. There have been protests left and right. These IDC members are being followed around. There are Twitter, followers are attacking these IDC members for not aligning with their Democratic conference because they are elected on a Democratic line. Let's just keep reinforcing that. They're elected as Democrats, but they are working with Republicans. They're receiving stipends and different perks from the Republicans because they are working with them. Now, something happened last week, and I think it's very indicative of where the funding and the support is coming from. You had a charter school, there's a Success Academy. You had a charter school. He's the president of Success Academy.
I think it's the chairman of the board.
Chairman of the board, excuse me.
Right.
Dan Loeb, who has gotten in a lot of hot water in the past over, crazy remarks, frankly. He went on a Facebook rant on his wall that many believed were racist and were pointing fingers at you. And he has been criticized publicly. A lot of folks have said that he should step down. But one of the reasons why this is, I think, so powerful is because the IDC and pretty much all of the Republicans and Governor Cuomo himself receive outrageous amounts of charter school money. And from my perspective, I see it as it's not just that the charter schools are funding the IDC. They're now funding the anti-choice movement. They're now funding anti-sanctuary cities movement. It's not just that they are pro-charter school. They are anti-progress. So how does your conference plan to deal with this charter school dilemma when they have so much money and they put together these super PACs and, they're hedge fund leaders that are completely unhinged?
Well, I think that what our Democratic Conference has always been very clear about is that we really are public servants. We understand that we're here to represent all New Yorkers, and we understand that if we keep our eyes on the prize, if we keep our focus on what people sent us there to do, we will be able to get it done. We are, like I said, it's not about anti-this or anti-that. Our conference, which again represents people from Long Island to Buffalo, we really have an extremely diverse conference geographically, demographically, etc. And we're just worried about education. We want to make sure that the young people who are educated in New York are not subjected to an education based on whether or not they're living in a good zip code. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure no matter where you live, that you are getting an education that is going to serve you well, not only in the state, but in the country, and obviously in this global arena. So we're fighting for that. The charter schools, I think we've been very clear. It's public dollars going into charter schools. We're looking for accountability. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's a conversation about whether or not teachers should be certified. We think that students should have certified teachers in the subject matter, frankly, that they're teaching before you begin to teach a school. Mm-hmm. We're asking for accountability because they're public dollars, because, as I've always said, education is a great equalizer. It matters that you're actually getting an opportunity so that you can really, make something of yourself. So, campaign finance reform, which is something that we as Democrats have really tried to fight for. Our conference has, again, fallen by the wayside because of the Republicans and their continued empowerment of our conference. And the charter school money is just indicative of what happens when you don't have any campaign finance reform. But I think that we still have an obligation to do the best thing we can for the people of New York, and certainly for the children who are depending upon public education to make sure that they succeed.
Do you see the leader of the IDC, Jeff Klein? There's been talks that you'd be willing to meet with him. There was an editorial calling for a meeting. And do you see him meeting with you anytime soon to sort out a deal? Well, again,
this editorial was in our local paper here in Westchester, and they made the point that they had asked for he and I to come to the editorial board. I was willing to come. He was not willing to come. But I believe that we can, if we sit down and again have the focus, what the focus should be, which is Democratic control of the Senate, we will be able to sit down and sort these things out. I've already said publicly that I have no problem with having a coalition type government with him. If indeed they can have a coalition government with Republicans, then it should be easy, frankly, to have a coalition government with people who you're actually ideologically aligned with. So I understand he doesn't want to end his conference, but I think that we should end end the stalemate and find a way for Democrats to come back together. And look, again, I'm not pretending that Democratic rule is a panacea, but I am saying to you that we are looking at a place now that even our health exchanges, which, were in jeopardy, fortunately, there's no similar IDC on a national level, because if that were the case, we wouldn't have, we wouldn't have Affordable Care, Obamacare today. But the reality is they could not repeal Obamacare. But right here, we could not vote with this current majority to have the exchanges codified into law. So this was an executive order. And the governor has tried to do a number of things that by executive order, but we know how important it is really to codify these things. Just think, if Obamacare was an executive order, it would absolutely be gone. So there's a reason why laws are enacted. And it makes a difference what you can actually enact and what you need to do by executive order, because you don't have a cooperating majority.
You mentioned Governor Cuomo. What is Governor Cuomo doing right now to realign the Democrats so that they work together? Because you'd think that a Democratic governor, who many think has aspirations to run for president, he has a Democratic assembly, you'd think that he'd want to have the most sweeping progressive legislation passed in the country in his own backyard, especially to campaign on. What is he doing right now to make sure that the Senate becomes Democratic again?
Well, again, I think the thing that started this conversation that you and I've been having, that became with the charter school people and so on and so forth, was the beginning, I think, of the governor's at least saying that he was willing to be involved in trying to get to a Democratic controlled Senate. So again, it was his meeting that he called with my conference, and the premise was that he is willing to do something that will bring Democrats together, but he wanted to make sure that all of my colleagues, all of the folks in my conference, were not opposed to having a coalition type government. So, I mean, it certainly was a step forward. And again, I think that we're looking at a time where we can't continue with personality conflicts. We can't continue with petty things. We are looking at very, very, very critical issues facing New York. And I think a united Democratic Party would be a good way to achieve our results.
When you go back into session, is there any sense that maybe some of these IDC members separately will leave and come over to your side? Will any of the dynamics change come January?
Well, I think what you said, I think people are getting pressure. And this has been going on for a long time. But, you never know what actually, changes the dynamic. And I got to say that the national occurrences, the results of that election has really not only had people looking inward, but also, again, looking at their local government, because they figure, well, we have another shot at the national 4 years from now. But we understand that next year the state legislature is up, Congress. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity. So people are now awakened in ways. And I think that the independent Democrats have got to be hearing from their constituents. I know that they are. I know that, there's a lot of stuff going on. And I know the Young Turks have been involved in making sure people are informed. So the reality is I think that it makes sense if we can come back together for a host of reasons to do that as quickly as possible. I'm hoping that next year we come together and we are governing. It's important. We really can and we must.
I think so too. Well, we'll be watching closely. You never know what's going to happen in the next few months. As clearly you're not things aren't quiet.
No, they're not. And you know what? Somehow I gave up the hope of a quiet lifetime many years ago. So now I'm just ready for whatever comes at me. And the reality is, I think I said it's a good time. People are awake in ways that they hadn't been awake, and I think all of this activism will really move. You know, even though it looks chaotic now, I think it'll move us forward.
Well, I'm sure your constituents in your conference are grateful that you don't live a quiet life.
Yes.
Senator Andrea Stewart Cousins, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time during your break to update our audience.
Yes, thank you. Enjoy LA.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Bye.